Hello everyone, welcome to the installation and maintenance video for the chat system. I'm Averhoff and the rest of the team consists of Mark Cameron and Tariq Juman. This video will consist of a detailed walkthrough of how to set up the chat system in Vagrant, as well as a rundown of all the code that makes the system function. BreazeHome is a project under the mentorship of Masoud Sadjadi, who is also the current project owner. So without further ado, let's get started. So if we go to the wiki, and this is going to be it's going to probably take quite a while for me to switch between pages because I only have 4 gigabytes on this Surface tablet, so bear with me. But anyways, once you're on the wiki, specifically the Vagrant section, I'm assuming that you have watched a couple videos like the Linux basics and the Linux searching, just so it makes it easier for you to traverse through the terminal, because this video will be entirely terminal based, at least for how to set up the Vagrant. Obviously, for the code, I'm going through the repository of all the necessary scripts that makes the chat system function. And given how our work is both on the front and back end, I'll be going back and forth between 2 repositories: the BreazeHome desktop and the Breeze chat repo. So I'm assuming you also have watched this video and set up Vagrant. So if you haven't, please watch that, because this video is primarily for setting up the chat system in Breeze. Once you set up set on the chat system in Vagrant once you set up the Vagrant system. So once you've set up Vagrant, go to your Breeze Vagrant directory if you haven't done so, and start up. And now you should start up you should now do Vagrant SSH. I think for me, I might have to do Vagrant up because I think I turned off the VM before I did this video. So we'll see what it tells me. It'll take a little while, so give some time. Okay, so yeah, it was already up and running. So once it started up, you'll see that you're in your share folder, and this folder is shared between the host and the VM. So navigate to the BreazeHome dev, and the main folder that we're going to look at is Breeze chat. Now, I'm assuming that you've already done sudo docker compose up/d and have built all your containers, and you have something like this: sudo docker ps. Let me maximize and make it clear so it's the format's much prettier. So you have something like this. You have BreazeHome desktop, BreazeHome chat, BreazeHome web, BreazeHome API, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, you want to have all these containers running. So once you have all those containers running, and you want to go to your Breeze chat folder, and I'm going to start listing all the important information that you need to know. So this folder is broken up into 3 important sections: the config folder, which houses all the secrets to for the Postgres database; lib, which I think is to set up all the routing information for the WebSocket. Yeah, so your endpoint. Okay, so my bad. Yeah, the lib folder is if you want to set up static assets. So this repo uses one important folder for housing static assets, and that's the upload folder. which if we go inside the endpoint, what houses that these images is this path right here, and you'll see this folder once you start up the container. So that's this folder. I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me first go to the config folder. So when you go inside this folder, you'll be greeted with 6 files. Each of these files, each of the secret folders are folders containing relevant information for starting up the Postgres database. So if we just take a look at one of them, you'll see that this host configuration for the username, password, host, port, database, as well as the URL that links up our uploads folder which houses all of our images. And our prod secrets houses similar information, but I guarantee you that each of these files will have different setup for development, production, and testing. So if we go to the secrets, you see it has the same configuration, username, post, but it has some additional information such as what port is the HTTP going to be using, and what allow origins are we going to connect to. And I'll talk about this because this is very important. So the last one I want to show, I think, is the config access. Yeah, okay. So the config, so as you saw in the config file, there was this import config mix env. So what the mix env is, that's an environment variable that's specific to mix, and that will allow you to switch between either production, testing, or development. And the way you set it up is if you go back to FIU dev and you do ls, you'll see that there's this environment file. If we open it up, you'll see it has configurations such as your editor, and can't see it. I don't really see it. That's weird. Okay, never mind. That was weird. So yeah, this is if you're working the chat system, this is the environment where you're going to be most concerned with. Obviously, we also have important information about the Postgres database. So that environment variable, if you want to go into development mode, you obviously change this to dev. If you want to change to production, you switch this to prod, and if you want to go to testing, you change this to test. Now, I strongly advise you, as I mentioned in the that's the desktop. Yeah, this is gonna be slow. If I go to the dashboard so I can show you. So I strongly advise you to read the Readme file in the breach chat repo before getting started, because there's some very important information, and there's pretty much one important section I want all of you to read. Yeah, so this is in deployment. So if we go down to the Readme file, what everyone should read is this part right here. Important, please read before starting. And what basically this says is that you should not explicitly change the value of mixed env to prod. You can change it to either dev or test, but don't change this to prod in either the env or the container. The reason is because is that mixed env gets changed to prod whenever you're in production mode, and if you change it manually either to the env or the container, then what's going to happen is it's not going to work once you go to localhost 8888 because check origin is going to try to resolve to an actual domain, and by default check origin domain is set to a dummy value, and this gets resolved once the Docker file gets run in production. So do not change mixenv to prod. Only change it to development or testing if you want to run some test scripts. So if you want to read this in full, please read this section right here before getting started. So with that out of the way, if we go back to the Breeze chat. So priv, to continue where we left off, privs, this houses 3 folders, but one of them is not necessary because this the chat acts as a JSON API and doesn't serve any static assets that is being held by the BreazeHome desktop. So what you're gonna want to look at is repo, and this folder, I should say, houses migrations folder and a scis.exs. There's the scis.exs if you want to run some script to populate the database with some dummy data, and migrations if you've ever worked with, let's say, the Django, will be familiar with what the purpose of this folder is. So if you were, let's say, create a new table, you will create a migration file that creates that table, so that when other people use this repo, it will manually run this migration file, automatically run all those migration files are inside this folder, and everyone will have an up-to-date Breeze chat repo. So that's this folder out of the way. So now the next one is test, which I don't really need to go into. That's if you want to make test scripts. The Phoenix documentation explains how to set up for testing, so I'll leave that up to you to check out the documentation for Phoenix. Docker file, pretty much you don't really need to mess with, but if you want to, that file holds important information for setting up the container, and I've added some nice comments for you to read, and so you can understand what each command is doing. The Docker entry point, that's a bash script that me and Daniel made so that it automatically does migrations and starts up the Phoenix server. Mix.es, this holds application information such as the dependencies and the project version, what Elixir version you're using. So whenever you want to add a new dependency, this is where you will want to add it. These are tasks that you can add to automate things. And whenever you add a new dependency, you want to add the application here. So that's this file. Mix lock, if you're familiar with web development, that's similar to package lock. And so finally, we're going to head into web, which is the folder that you're primarily going to be working on. So web folders that has all these folders and files. So we have channels, controllers, models, and views. So Phoenix just like Angular, follows the MVC architecture. So we have models, we have views, and we have controllers. Another file that you want to pay attention to is the router.exs. This file is responsible for setting up routing information. So currently, right now, we only have one route. So allow me to demonstrate what I mean. So if we were to go to localhost 4000, which is the port for Phoenix, you will see that there's no route form for get slash. This is the root of the project, and the reason why you're getting this page is because you only have one route. The route is API messages. So if we were to go to API/messages and give it an argument such as last seen ID, we will get back some information in the form of a JSON. So if you ever want to add a new route, here's where you want to add it in. Now, our models. So we have two models currently, message.ex and user.ex. Message.ex is the model that contains information of how a message would look like. So currently, this is how our message model looks like. We have room, text, image extension is delivered from user and to user, and this function here is responsible for saving an image, and our change set is for it validates any insertion to the database. And then our user .ex is similar to the one in the Django, and it has a relationship with our message table, and it's as well as a foreign, and it acts as a foreign key. So obviously there's a relationship between these two models where a user has many message and a message belongs to a user. All right, so that's that directory. So going to our views. Our views, we have our message view and our pagination helpers. The rest of these were generated by Phoenix. So our message view is responsible for has two render methods. This one is for rendering many messages. This is for rendering a single message. And you can imagine that you can add different views here if need be, because remember that view has to be associated with a controller. So if you were to create, I don't know, a chat view, you would obviously need a chat controller as well. All right, so that's the views. Now let's go to the controllers. And as you saw on the router, we only have one controller. And notice that we have a folder called API, which matches our router, because now if we go to API, we're going to get to message controller, so which matches up nicely with API messages. And so now if we open our message controller, this message controller is in charge of rendering all our messages. And so you notice that I added this argument last seen ID is equals 1. That's because we wanted to invoke this index method. If we wanted to invoke this index method, not only will we need to add the last seen ID, but we also will need to add in the user ID and the room that we're in. And then we will get all the messages associated with this room. Now, last but not least is actually the folder. I said like you'll be working on the web, but this right here the channels folder, this is definitely where you're going to be spending most of your time. So we have 4 main files. A process.ex, which is in charge of tracking users. This was a file that was automatically generated by Phoenix, and it's used in the project. Our socket, our user socket, this folder is primarily for the socket to connect. That's why we have this connect function. And right now it just takes the ID of the user, gets the current user, and appends it to the socket. Primarily what you probably will want to add to this is authentication by some means, maybe like maybe by token that the user gets once they log in. But anyways, the next important section in this file is this part right here. So when the socket connects, they have to be able to join to a channel, and the way you do that is you specify what channel are they able to join. So a socket able to join a user : in a private : Now the star is a regular expression, meaning I can join user : 1, user : 2, basically any string that matches this regular expression. And of course, you also need a channel for the socket to be able to join. And this is how you would do that. BreazeHome chat, which is the name of the application, and dot whatever channel you want to attach this regular expression to. And then of course we have the channels. So currently in the current system we have 2 channels: private channel, which is for starting a private chat, and user channel, which is the user's own personal library. And that concludes the entire backend, how everything functions. You have your channels, which is used for handling socket connection, handling messages, authentication. Then you have your controllers, which is in charge of redirecting messages and rendering them. And then you have your models, which is describes how your messages are and the relationship with the user. Then you have your views, which is how the message is going to get rendered. And then you have your router, which is just simply for you to set up your routing. And those are the files and folders that you really care about. So let me just start up the Docker container so you can see it running. So now I'm in the chat container. So if I do ls, notice that now we have an uploads folder. If we see in there, we will see that we have two images. These are images that I just added because I was messing around with the chat system and I added those images. But any image that you sent will get redirected to this uploads folder, and they're all named by the messages ID. So if I were to send another message now, it would be 6.jpg or maybe 6.png. It's all based on the message ID. And you will see that if you go to the models messages file, you'll see that the save image uses the messages ID. Yeah, and this how. And for other containers, I think if you want to make a change, you won't be able to in the terminal directly. You probably would have to go to one of your editors. Like I use Visual Studio. Well, first of all, you'll probably want to go to your folder BreazeHome dev and then BreazeHome chat. go to the file that you want to modify and open up your favorite editor and make your changes in there. But now, if you want to run tests, you would, well, first of all, if you were to do env, this will load up all the environment variables that are specific to this container. So notice that we have the Postgres port, we have the Elixir version, we have the allowed origin, we have the port, and we have mixenv. So by default, and this is what I've said before, by default it's going to be in dev, and you should leave that dev because it's going to change to production once you run the container in the production mode. So, but again, if you, let's say you want to test, so what you would do is that you would temporarily change mixenv to test, which is fine. That's fine, but just don't change it to prod. So now if we do env, we can see now that mixenv is now test, and this is fine because you didn't really actually change in the env file. Because if I were to exit, so now I've exited the container, I've gone back into the container, and if I were to do env now, you would see that it goes back to dev. So this is very nice because if you were to destroy something in the container, you can just simply exit out and it will go back to its default version, which is very good. So and once you set mixenv to test, all you have to do then is do mix test, and it will run all the files, all the test scripts that are inside tests. And if you want to look at how to make tests, you can go to test channels, and I have some examples of how you can run some unit tests in XUnit. And that's this one, private channel, well, cat private channel. So these are some tests, unit tests that I made, and then you can look at it and see how I want to make tests. So I think I've done a thorough walkthrough of the backend. So now we're going to move into the front end and see how everything works, how everything communicates with the backend. So for that, I'm going to actually use the repo for this, because I think it was simply important. Actually, well, I guess I think to keep it consistent, then I'll do it through the terminal still, just to keep it consistent. So now we're gonna start up the front end. So we're gonna do the sudo docker it desktop bash. So now we're in the desktop, and so if you work in the chat, you want to go to app, and once you go to app, there's going to be three folders you're going to want to look at. You want to look at views, you want to look at scripts, and you want to look at styles. So let's start with the easiest one. Let's go to styles. And when it comes to style, the only style sheet that you want to look at is the chatbox.css. And if you want to make improvements to the agent, because we did work on that, then you want to look at the agent search .css. And so chatbox.css is mainly the styling on the chat bubble and the chat box that gets opened up once you click on the chat bubble. So that's that. Now the views, again, if you're working on the agent, you want to look at the agent search.html, as well as the agent list view and the agent grid view. If not, then all you really need to look at is the chatbox.html. So if we go to chatbox.html, it has the HTML that renders not only the chat bubble, which is this part right here, but it renders in charge of rendering the entire chat box, which is up to here. This is the type of indicator that sends the message, oh, is user typing. That's this right here. And then this is the form container, which is in charge of sending messages. So that's the views. So now, last but not least, we're going to go to script, and this is the one that again, just like the chat, just like the backend, this we're going to be mostly working. So once you're in scripts, the ones you're going to want to look at is the directives. So and the services. So let's first go to directives. In directives, you want to look at the chat box. So the way the chat box works is that we have the chat service injected as one of its parameters. That's how we're able to communicate with this. And we have a lot of important variables like message, image, pagination, functions like toggle boxing, switching between chat conversation and chat log, rendering the chat name, counting all the chat log messages. So this location is if you want to create new functionalities for the chat box, pretty much. That's what I'm saying. Now, and so how does this? So like I said, the chat service is what we're going to want to look at next, because this is our bread and butter when it comes to communicating to the chat server, and that is in service. So we go to service and we go to chat.js. You see it has a bunch of getter methods for getting the socket, the channels, the messages, but it also has other important things like connect to sockets, which will instantiate a new Phoenix socket for us and connect to the Phoenix server. So once you do this, if you remember when I showed you when we're looking to the breeze chat, the user socket.ex, that is where the socket is going to go once we start this function. So then we have connect to user channel, and connect to private channel. Both of these functions get called they get called in various situations. They get called when we start a private channel with an agent, which is what this function is going to do. And once we log in, and if we don't have any unread messages, we will be directed immediately to the private channel. So if we don't have unread messages, we're going to automatically connect to the user channel. That by default, every single user connects to their own personal lobby. And if we do have unread messages, then we're going to connect to the agent, to the private channel. Then we have other important stuff like creating messages, counting. So what this, so whenever you want to add new API calls, this is where you want to add it. Like for example, we have an API call to messages. So maybe if you want to have an API call to chat, or I don't know, anything else you can think of, you want to add it here. Or if you want to declare a new variable that you want the the chat box directive to use, you probably want to create it here. So that should conclude the front end. You have your chat box directives, you have your chat service, you have your chat box HTML, and you have your styling. Those are the 4 things you want to look at. And of course, since we're talking about agents starting a private chat with clients, you should know where this is located. So going back to scripts, if you go to controllers, and then you go to agent profile. So I'm going to go into cat agent profile.js. You see we have a important function here, chat with agent, which is a function that me and Dane did, so that we integrated this the chat system in the agent profile page. Oh, and I forgot. So this is something very important I forgot to mention. So if you want to add a chat box, add the chat bubble to any page, really, there is a couple of things that you need to do. So let's say I go to views, and let's say I wanted to add a chat bubble to agent search. Well, I think agent search already has, but I think I'm still going to go there just so I can show you. So this right here, for any page you want to add, you would want to add the chat box directive to the page. So now this ngIf, ngIf basically checks if this object, this private channel object, hasn't been created, and if it hasn't been created, then it won't show up the chat bubble. If it has, then it will create this chat bubble under new scope. And this part here is very important. If you're not familiar with Angular's two-way binding, I would strongly suggest that you look into it. But basically what this is doing is it's binding this here, which is a isolated scope, to this variable, and that goes for all of these. These are all being assigned to an isolated scope. And to show you, if we go back to scripts and then controller and then agent agent profile, you see that we have something like private messages, private cons, private channel, and notice that that matches up exactly with this. Chat log messages equals private messages, chat com messages equals private com messages, and channel equals private channel. These needs to be real variables, which are these right here. And this is important. So this is so that once we've switched to a new channel, switch to a new private chat, that the chat bubble gets destroyed. Because if not, then you run into issues that some events don't get binded, you can't send messages. So this right here is very important. So okay, so now is there anything else that needs to be explained? So I guess I should explain how everything works in a high level manner. So to do that, I'm going to go to localhost 88 and show everything in action. So once a user has logged, it goes into the Breeze chat. Either they're logged in or they're not. And if you're not logged in, then you log in with your account, and then now you make one. Now, if a user has unread messages, then like I said, they will be connected to their private channel that will connect, and it will connect them to whatever user, whatever user sent that message. It could have been an agent, it could have been a client. It doesn't really matter. If not, then they will stay in the user channel. So once I click find agent, and I find an agent, and I click the chat button, what happens is we go through the process of getting both of their IDs, creating the name of the room, checking if they're if the channel they're in matches the name. If it does, then they're already in the chat. There's no point in connecting them again. If they're not, then we leave the current channel, and then we switch to that new channel. And upon switching, we call to our connect private channel, which makes a call to the Phoenix chat and goes through the process of authenticating the user based on their ID. So each channel, each socket has a topic, which that topic is coincidentally also the name of the room. And each room name follows a specific format called private : ID, which is the sender's ID : ID, which is the recipient's ID. And it's very important that all those IDs are in ascending order, because if not, what's going to happen is I send a message to an agent, and it's the name of the room could be, let's say, private : 3:23, but now let's say agent sends a message. What's going to happen is that the name of that room is going to then be private : 23:3. Now notice the IDs are the same, but the order of the IDs are different. So you can think of it that even though I'm communicating to the same person, it's saying that we're in a different room. That's why it's important that the IDs maintain in ascending order. And then once the user is authorized, then it will send back an OK status, and if not, it would send an unauthorized. It will load all the messages, and yeah, gave us some time because it was like very slow. And it will show this chat bubble, and once you open up, it will load all the messages that you see here. There's no messages because I haven't talked to this person, but if I were to send a message, it will send a message here. So now Phoenix, just like Angular, has ways to link up events, and so in our repo we have three events: read message, message create, and user typing. The rest are events from the presence module that Phoenix has. And so message create, that gets called each time a message gets created, such as when I type and click enter. User typing gets called once when I'm typing, and gets called again when I stop typing. Notice I only call it once when I'm typing because it makes no sense to constantly tell the servers that I'm typing. I only tell them once. And so message create, user typing, and okay. So message create, user typing. Yeah, I forgot which one, but there was another one. So then the presence model that is native to Phoenix that is in charge of detecting if a person is online or not, and if they're typing. So the Phoenix present model has two events: the Phoenix state and the Phoenix diff. Phoenix state gets called once the person first joins a channel. It's the first time they join a channel. The Phoenix diff gets called each time a person leaves or enters a channel. So there's a subtle difference there. The Phoenix state is when they first enter a channel. The Phoenix diff is once they enter and leave a channel. There's a slight difference there. And I think that about covers how the chat repo and the desktop repo communicates. So if you have any questions, hold on, it's pretty slow. Let the page load. So if you have any questions, you can contact me or any of my team members who worked on this. These are our contacts. And if you want to contact Sadjadi about BreazeHome, these are his contacts. Thank you for listening. I know this was a pretty long video, but thank you and good.